Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Okay, this is another installment in our casting series that I'm doing here about casting working models from clay maquettes. I'm using a number of maquettes I've done just as sketches, which I normally do as preliminary work now for just about every job. These weren't ones I had to cast immediately, so they've been lingering and it's time to get the clay back in the bucket and make something else. So I've got a 4-foot St. Francis with a dove here that's a custom composition designed to approximate something that a customer had requested, and as a bas relief. The niche is 4 feet tall, it's 4 inches deep. It's a large job. Now I've done waste molds, videos on that. This would be a gob of work to do as a waste mold. It's a big project, so it would also be good to use silicone, the nice silicone, but because it's so big, that'd be expensive. So I'm going to do a method that I was taught by a person that came in to carve there in Vermont at the studio, and he'd done some work, foundry work, Ryan Mays, and they use this method to produce some of their molds for casting work. This is using a Silicone 1 GE pure silicone, 100% silicone product, and this used to be pretty affordable back 20 years ago. This tube was just $2 or $3. Okay, now it's $8 or $9, so it's not as cheap as it used to be. The pourable silicone is at least $100 to $110 a gallon that I like to use. So this isn't necessarily much cheaper anymore, but it's convenient because you can go to your local hardware store and pick up 3 tubes or 5 tubes. You don't have to order $100 a gallon and activator and everything else. So first I'm going to go over and tune up some of the defects on this. It's an old piece of clay. It's been sitting around for a few years. Got to clean up and touch up a few things, and then we'll get to work. I'll release it. I'll use you can use whatever you'd like. You can use a petroleum jelly. You can use a soap product. I was taught to use naphtha soap, just a laundry bar, shave it up and mix it the way you want. So that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll dive right into our elbows and we'll make a mold of this with the silicone. It'll allow us to produce more than one cast if we'd like, where it's so complicated that gives you a chance to do a better job. If you do a cast and you end up losing a significant amount of detail because you didn't do the cast right, when you charge in the investment and actually make a positive. So this is a large job, which is why it's underneath my crane, because Superman doesn't live here anymore, and I need a little help getting this around. So we'll put this together. I probably won't cast the entire niche. I don't think we need that much plaster. I'll do some of the ground but mainly capture the figure, and then we'll do a mother. We'll have to get it apart and just hang in there. This will take a few videos, and it actually will be a little bit easier than a waste mold. So hang in there and see if you can learn something. Okay, I've got my clay all straightened out, touched up little defects and everything. I'm going to use some Fell's naphtha soap, just a laundry soap. You can use Dawn dish detergent or whatever you want. This is what I was taught to use for release agent, so this is what I'll use. And I'll just cut some up. Got a can full. Do a little bit more, it's a big job. Get out my brush. Grab my handy squirt bottle of water. and I'll start mixing this up. Now, you don't necessarily have to release this clay. This plastic, it's Roma Plastilina, old sulfur clay. And for all the people that say it interferes with silicone curing and whatever, well, I've not found that to be the case. I found it's usually a problem of either using a silicone that you can't apply thick or not waiting long enough, but that's just me. So, but this hardware store silicone is a lot different than silicone that's made for casting. It has, depending on what type you get, it has an etching agent in it so that it gets a really good grip and it ain't coming off. If you get it on the wood or anything that isn't released, and I don't even like putting it on wood unless there's tape or something on it, it won't come off and you're done. It's just, you'll have to cut it or tear it. But this will help it shed the clay a little easier. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started here and start releasing it. It's important to get way down into it. I like to have it a little foamy, a little thick, more like a gel than a liquid, like what I do when I painted the waste mold. I want this to come off, and I know that this will hold. So I want to make sure I get all I can, get it really good. I'm not going to worry too much about this wooden face. I'm going to put tape on this. I'm not going to go all the way up on the sides, but I've got to have something for a foundation for this to stand on when it's cast. And so I've got to have a pretty good joint or base or plinth or foot or whatever you want to call it. Take your time, do it right. Make sure you get everything. Don't go all over. I like to do things that aren't quite as intricate first. Then I can spread it all out. One of the reasons that I prefer this naphtha or soap product over an oil or like a petroleum jelly product like Vaseline or even a silicone or something is that this won't typically change the consistency of my clay that much. I use this Roma over and over and over again, and if I use a Vaseline type product on there that contributes more oil to the clay, it tends to change the consistency. It gets very soft, very fast. That's nice if you want fast clay. It's not as nice if you want clay that's stiff and holds its shape. So that's not what I want it to hold its shape, and I know what I like. So that's really up to you. I mean, it's nice to have some fast clay. If you're used to working in Roma that's not coming from a pot, it's pretty stiff. Chavants, some of those are the same way. But if you may want that. So it's up to you. I like to do, when I'm doing this release, it can be hard to keep track of where you're at. Sometimes when you're working, people show up, the phone rings, or you run out of day. So if you go from one feature and then finish it, like you do a fold all the way to the next fold, and you progress your way up slowly versus just taking a general slather it on everywhere as a pro, you got a more consistent result. The silicone won't dissolve this soap, so if there are little nibs or junk, as long as they're flush with the surface, they'll stick in the silicone and it doesn't impact the mold as much. Um, and the silicone will stretch. You may lose a little bit, but it typically you're not going to have problems with this with bubbles. What you will have is you'll have some faceting from lines of where you apply it, and that'll make sense when I start doing it. I'll point it out and show you. So if you're in a rush, there may be a lot of little lines on the job. If you go slow and careful, there won't be as many, and so you can greatly eliminate them depending on how carefully you work. Okay, I've got the entire clay released. Now I'm going over with a wet brush to thin the release a little bit, anywhere where there may be build, any crevices. I want this to be, if you watch the waste mold video, I threw that on real quick, wasn't too concerned about it, and kind of wanted to do it as a demonstration so that you can see that it is possible to leave foam in crevices, like down here, somewhere where it could pool and puddle and foam and build a little bit, and that can transfer to your mold. So for what this is, I'm going to go through and make sure that it's thinned out really well. Try to eliminate any build just with a wet soapy brush, but it's very wet. And this is a twofold that'll make sure that everything's released, but it'll also help make sure that there's no build that I don't want that could interfere with detail, because this is a lot more detailed job, and there's a lot more to capture here. This is something that wasn't pointed, it was carved direct, but there's still a lot of good information here, particularly the drapery and the posture. This is very standard genre posture for an icon like this. This is how the drapery typically goes, and if you're going to carve authentic work and then you carve the drapery interpreted and you just make it up, someone that knows their business is going to look at it and know that you don't know what you're doing, that you're just an amateur, that you're not familiar with the protocols and with what would typically be found in like a DePrado or a DePrado statuary catalog, something like that. So this is just going over to double check to make sure everything's good. I've gone up about halfway on the Scotia, so I've captured this wing, and that will actually make this a more dramatic cast. I went all the way up here at the bottom, just sort of tapered it up. And I'll do the bottom thicker so it's a little bit stronger. We'll have to stand this up and make it work. So anyways, keep working. Got this all wrapped up in terms of the release and the overwash at the end. Now I'll take my leftover naphtha, clean my brush out into it real well, probably get it out of the nooks and crannies, and I'll just set it aside and let it dry. And then when I need it next time, I'll just put some water in it and keep going. No reason to throw this soap away. It's not going to spoil. So just a way to save a little bit of money while you're doing this, because this all costs money. This will probably cost the better part of $100 just in silicone to do this model. We'll see. I expect it'll take half a dozen tubes, and it may take more. Won't build it really thick, but between that and the hydrocal for the mother, and then the actual physical charge or pour, there'll be a lot to it. So this isn't just a throwaway model. So, but save what you can, so you've got more money, do what you want to do. Okay, you can see this is starting to dry pretty well. It's got a nice sheen to it. I'm going to let this set for it's the end of the day. I'm going to let it set. I'll get to this in the morning with the silicone and let it dry off real well. This is the first step in doing a basic silicone mold using hardware store, just plain in the tube silicone. And so there'll be a few parts to this series. We'll wrap this video up now, and I'll start tomorrow with showing you how I apply the silicone and start building the actual mold, and then we'll put a mother on it and turn it out, strip it, everything else, and cast a nice job. So my name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio, showing you how to do working models from clay maquettes. Thanks for coming in.